Tonight in our TV8 living room we've assembled some pioneers of aviation, particularly those that relate to the pioneer aspects of San Diego's participation in aviation and the things that happened on North Island that made aviation practical. So far we've covered the initial flights in the flight school of Glenn Curtis, the various experiments, the first loop-to-loop, the briefly touched on the aero refueling, and we have some more interesting and exciting footage relating to that. But I happen to mention the flight around the world, and there's a city up north, some little town up there called Seattle, that's taking all the credit for this, and actually it did start and it did end in San Diego. I believe Colonel Seaford, you can tell us something about this.
That's right. There were 5 Douglas round-the-world cruisers built in Santa Monica, Clovis Field. They were flying down here for their checking and taking off the rigid fuel lines and put on flexible fuel lines. And Major Martin, Lowell Smith, Lee Wade, Eric Nelson, and Les Harlow, they took off from here, flew to Seattle, and we all went up there to see them off. And the only reason they say it started from Seattle was because that's right next to the Canadian border.
Yes.
But it started right here in San Diego, and they took for a bill at Santa Monica. Major Martin got as far as the Aleutians, and a mountain got in his way.
Yes.
And then Lowell Smith took over, and they succeeded flying around the world. It took them from 70-odd days because it was a supply problem. They'd have to go from landing gear to pontoons, pontoons to landing gear.
It took 70 days to fly the remaining planes that made it around the world?
Yes. 3 of them finally made it. One, Les Arnold, Lee Wade lost his ship out in the Atlantic, and they gave him another ship when he got into New York. And finally all 4 wound, but only 5 originally started, 3 completed it, but the 4th completed by getting another ship delivered to them in New York.
I believe this must have been a logistics problem too, because they must have started at least a year in advance to get the fuel deposited around the world that they would need and the spare parts that they might anticipate and things like this.
That was a 1.5 year logistic problem because we had supply bases stationed all over the world, and that is with the routes. See, engines those days only flew 75 hours.
And they had to be torn down and rebuilt.
You had to pull them out and replace them.
Roughly, just very roughly, what was the route around the world? From San Diego to Seattle to where?
And up the Aleutians, through Russia.
Yes.
And finally one down through India, then across the Atlantic to Africa, then across the Atlantic.
Yes. Across the
Coming
Azores.
by Iceland,
Yeah.
and down into New York, then down to Florida, then back to San Diego.
What year was this?
1923, not 1924.
Oakley Kelly, I believe you tell me that in Seattle they had to take off 4 times before they really got going.
No, it was in Portland, Oregon.
Yes.
It was due to the false start, you might say. I was commanding a reserve activity in Portland, Oregon, Pearson Field, Portland, Vancouver Barracks in Portland, Oregon. And they came in there for refueling, left for Seattle, and was blocked with some fog, and turned and came back. And then they completed their flight around the world, came out through here and went to Seattle and came back south again. So I had them pull my hands 4 different stops.
Now, the Navy was interested in aviation right from the very beginning. First of all, taking off from the water, and then came the natural thought within the Navy of being able to take off and land on a ship. We have, is Admiral Sprague the next man up, Major Helen?
I believe so.
What can you tell us about this phase?
Well, I first like to say I feel awful humble in this company with these real old timers here. I think the station did a wonderful job of getting them together here.
It could only be done in San Diego.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. Well, anyway, no, I'm a kind of a Johnny come lately. I'll talk about the landing in a minute. But I started to fly from North Island in 1919, right after the war. I was in command of a destroyer, but I wanted to get into this aviation business. The war was over, and so I finally got down to Pensacola for training in 1920, and I finished my course in 1921 at Pensacola. Those days, there were only 100 naval aviators in the regular Navy permitted. In other words, there was no money to pay more than 100 naval aviators. So my class, when they graduated, ran the number up over 100. So we weren't, although we finished in May, we weren't designated until August because they didn't have any money to pay us.
You were flying on paper, but you were flying really, but not on paper.
We were flying as student naval aviators.
I see.
The disadvantage of that was only that you only got 35% instead of 50%, which was quite
extra pay.
Yes. And your pay was $200 a month. That made a lot of difference.
Now, this is obviously a boat, a ship, and it has a deck. Of course, the first aircraft carrier was not built from the water up. It was a converted vessel, was it not?
It was a
You recognize this gentleman?
a coal ship, carrier.
Yes.
And
What kind of a plane do we have here?
that's an Air Marine.
Now, the initial...
That's not a bad landing. If you walked away from it, it's three-pointer.
The idea was to put something to stop the plane in the land. Taking off, we had to get a plane that could take off in a comparatively short runway, but landing at the speed, oh my goodness.
This is kind of a funny story about these crashes. You go aboard for the day you were going to qualify. You made your practice carrier landings on the field so that you could follow the signals of the signal officer. But then they fly you all aboard, and you go up the cabin and on the boardroom, and on the way out to the flying place off San Diego, they would show you these pictures of previous landings, all of which were dangerous because they were all crashes, you see, showing you the results of
not following instructions.
Yeah. Their technique. Well, first, by the time you've seen the last of those, you were kind of a little bit on edge.
Well, there's a great deal of difference, too, in taking off in an airplane and landing on a landing strip that might be even smaller than the deck of a carrier, but the psychological hazard of making that little strip when there's just water on each side must be quite something to overcome.
Actually, landing on a carrier, like a good many things, looks terribly difficult, particularly nowadays when these great big 80,000-pound airplanes come sailing in, you know, in rough, the winds are going up and down. But as I say, it looks terribly difficult, but it's really quite easy. I mean, it's not difficult at all.
In the early days, were you concerned with those early experiments of how to stop a plane, all the problems that they had on a...
Well, yes, I made my first carrier landings in 1926. Of course, that was a long time after they started. They actually started to make landings on the Langley about 1922.
Now, the Langley, this was the converted coal ship?
Yes. And she was all right for the purpose. Her deck was about, I forgot, it was about 400 feet long, and that was plenty of room in those days. And what was then a modern airplane, like the Boeing fighters, that family of fighters, F-1 and F-2B and F-4B, they'd only need, with 13 or 15 knots of wind over the deck, they'd only need about 80 or 90 feet to get off.
Now, the plane just had a permanent hook on the underside of its fuselage.
Yes, the hook was at a place located. It was a little bit aft of the center of gravity of the aircraft. Well, now, when we started to fix hooks on airplanes so we could land on deck, they made a good guess and decided to put the hook where it was, where we always had it, with relation to the center of gravity. It was just one of those lucky things that happened, because the British spent, I guess 8 or 10 years trying to find out where the heck to put the hook. See?
If you would put it too far back, I presume that the sudden shock would lift the airplane up and make it crash down like that.
Well, I don't know exactly all the aerodynamics of it, but the hook in the right place, the airplane makes a very nice...
We made a lucky guess.
Yeah, the designers made a lucky guess. They started off, however, and this is rather amusing. They started off, of course, with the ship wires, the things that the hooks.
Yes, this is the wires that go across the deck.
The first landings on the Pennsylvania, the battleship Pennsylvania, were made. They had these lines going across the deck with sandbags on the ends of it. Yes. So the farther the plane went, the more sandbags it had to pull along, and it would stop in the 80 feet that was available to it. But in any case, they also had these, in order to keep the airplane on the deck, they had what were called the fore and aft wires. And the fore and aft wires were above the arresting gear
of the deck
wires, which were short ship.
Yes.
So what happened is that if your hook didn't get an arresting gear wire,
yes,
but hooked itself over this fore and aft wire.
The final warning.
You went sailing up the deck with not stopping anything, and you stopped where the wire disappeared into the deck. That was the end of the line.
Then you hung over the side.
What usually happened then is, of course, the plane would go over the side because it would rebound back, and there was wire coming along behind it, and it would end up over the side. Some of those things were fatal, but usually not. They were very, matter of fact, the carrier landing accidents are very few and far between that are fatal. They're embarrassing, of course, for the pilot.
And sometimes very wet.
Huh?
And sometimes very wet.
Yes, sometimes wet. But there have been very few fatal carrier accidents, strangely enough.
Now we come up to 1924, and I believe, Colonel Seifert, you have another refueling situation here that we're going to talk about. Is that correct?
Was that the 1929 question mark refueling?
All right, 1929. We've passed 24 and we've come up to 29. And what was the significance of this refueling? They've already proven that it could be done. What's happening now?
Well, in 29, they had better ships. They had 3 engine jobs with catwalks and toilet accommodations and sleeping facilities, and it was really a boat ride. And they had a bigger ship, and they could take on more gas. They could have stayed there indefinitely, except the rocker arms start pushing in on the tappets on the valves until there's about that much clearing. Now you can see the question mark being refueled there now.
This was an endurance flight.
Yes, 150 hours around San Diego and Los Angeles, using the same principle that we did. But they weren't criticized like we were. We were told by the chief of the Air Forces, who was not really an Air Force officer, he was just put in there from another branch of the service, the Corps of Engineers. Our flight was just a circus stunt. Well, now you've got some 4-star generals in there. General Spock, 4-star general. General Aker, Lieutenant General. Pete Quesada, 3-star general. Then things began to change in the refueling business. Now we do it every 15 minutes a day, around the clock. And it's not considered a circus stunt any longer.
This, who was the pilot of the question mark? Do you recall the name of it?
Yes, that was Ira Aker, General Aker, and Suey Spock, General Spock, who later became Chief of the Air Forces after General Arnold.
What kind of a plane was he flying to establish this record?
That was a Fairchild, I think. Wasn't it, Oakley? That was a 300.
Tri-motor Fokker.
Was it tri-motor Fokker?
Yeah. That's what I was saying, Fokker.
I wasn't sure whether it was a Fokker or a Fairchild. They both looked a lot alike.
Now, in the early days of really daily flying, there were a lot of time. You recognize some funny people in this picture?
Oh, I know them all, yes.
Name somebody out
Well,
there?
it's hard. They're moving around pretty fast.
I saw you jump there like you saw a bunch of old buddies there.
Well, yeah, there's General Spock right there. There's Ira Aker over there. There's Pete Quesada standing right there.
Gentleman with the military hat?
Yes, that's General Spock.
Yes.
He had charge of the 8th Air Forces in England, and General Aker was his assistant. World War II.
I was about to say that in the early days of aviation, around 29, you saw a lot of tri-motor planes. The original transport was the Ford tri-motor. Why did the tri-motor disappear and go out of favor?
Well, the tri-motor didn't necessarily disappear, but well, it was a heavy airplane built by Stout on the Ford financing, and it was a slow airplane, but you know there's still some of those airplanes flying today.
I understand that there's some places in South America where they're so popular and the people have confidence in them that recently they've completely reproduced support tri-motors. Has anyone ever heard that story?
Yes, they'll take off on a dime, you know, and they're a wonderful airplane. The reason they were corrugated, we didn't know too much about metallurgy of taking care of aluminum, tempting aluminum. So we corrugated them to get the strength. Now, of course, there you have a flat surface and a greater lift. And
if anyone doesn't know what we're talking about, if you've ever seen a Ford tri-motor, in addition to the 3 motors, it was distinguished by the fact that it looked like it was made out of somebody's shed because it had this corrugated metal all over the entire surface.
They used to call them flying voting booths because in Detroit the voting booths were portable and were made of corrugated iron.
the first all-metal airplane built in the Pacific Coast was built right here in San Diego by George Pruden down where the Solar Aircraft is now.
The first all-metal airplane?
Yes, right here in San Diego.
What year would that be?
That was in 1900 and about 27.
What kind of metal would he use? Would he use just sheet aluminum?
That was corrugated. Just took the side off of a barn and made a wing out of it.
When did the Allies, the Doral and the other light metals come along? Let's see where we at here.
Well, that's the Distinguished Flying Cross when I was given that by the Secretary of War for the first refueling flight. There's a copy of that now in the Smithsonian Institute along with the diorama of the first refueling flight. There's always been a little conflict. Who did the first refueling flight? Was it done at 23 or 29? A There's no question about that one. That's dated 1920.
Many of our in the air between here and the flagship in the Pacific in Long Beach to try to sell Admiral Rodman the fact that aeroplanes were due to spot with the gunfire. But they'd have no part of it. So month after month and day after day, they would get on their little Block V or a DH and fly up to Long Beach and try to sell the Admiral. The fact that airplanes were come into its own now as far as spotting for gunfire and target practice for the fleet. So finally the Admiral decided, well, if you feel that way about it, there must be something to it. We'll give you people a chance. You're just an auxiliary of the Navy anyway, and you're here. It costs the taxpayers a lot of money, so we might as well try and use you. So we made a camp at the old Doherty Field up in Long Beach. We had tent hangars and small hangars to sleep in, crane boxes we made out of mess hall out of that thing. And we assembled these DHs, where the old Spotting 1, called Spotting Squadron 1, and waited for the battleship to go up on the range.
You said a DH,
Yeah,
did you have a de Havilland?
A DH-4B is what
Yes.
they called them. We used those for spotting, and we had the Dada system of the radio through the battleship for the rangefinders. So when the battleships went on the range this particular day, why, the fog came in. And our squadron was in the air about all the way from 4,000 to 6,000 feet, waiting for the word to commence fire. Well, the fog moved in, and Emil Charret and Ray Taylor with one airplane was spotting for the Arizona. Well, they were up above this stuff, and they could see the target. The battleships couldn't see the target. So the Arizona started firing on the second salvo. They straddled it, and it was the only ship that got any hit on that whole particular practice of the whole battlefield of the Pacific. So that sold aviation as far as spotting of the fleet was concerned, and we became part of it more or less from then on. But it was quite a stunt, and Captain Mustin and then Lieutenant Commander Mark A. Mitcher deserve an awful lot of credit for the aviation in the air as far as the battleship in conjunction with the Navy is concerned. That sold the Navy on it, along with Admiral Moffett, who became our first Chief of Bureau of Aeronautics in Washington, was also a very enthusiastic aviator, and learned a lot about it. He was killed on the Acme, you probably know. But from then on, why, aviation more or less came into its own. They had the catapults on the cruisers, and for spotting for gunfire, and we began to think that we were probably in our part of the Navy.
Did you also use them to spot submarines?
Oh yes, we used those patrol boats in World War I, usually HS-1s and 2s. I happen to remember the first aeronautic attach, but the same with the French Army and French Navy in France. And we were trained for that particular work to do, to spot submarines completely through French Telliers. And the first station that was equipped in France, so that we took over from the French government, Lieutenant Corey.
Well, would this be the Lafayette Escadrille?
No. That was the Lafayette Escadrille and the Flying Corps. They came from the Foreign Legion.
I see.
But we went over as the first aeronautic attach to the United States Navy.
Oh, you actually were in the United States service, where the Lafayette Escadrille was a volunteer
There was no
organization.
facilities for training at Pensacola in those days.
Right.
So they shipped us over to trade with the French. Lieutenant Whiting took us over on the Jupiter, which afterwards became the Langley. He was a coal collier in those days. We had grain and flour aboard to feed 1 million men for 2 months. So when we got over there, we were met by Lieutenant Dykeman and Lieutenant Chevalier, and taken to the School of Tours, the French Army School of Tours. And we had instructors that didn't speak English, and we didn't speak French. None of us knew anything about the theory of flight. We didn't know what made an airplane stay in the air. So one of our group, a man named Forth Hardendorf, he wrote to his father, and he sent him a little book called Loading Airplane Speaks, which you gentlemen no doubt have seen a lot of. And that's where we learned the theory of flight. And everybody in that squadron, out of 50 of us, 36 qualified, with instructors that didn't speak English and we didn't speak French. We were flying Codrons. Everyone sold in less than 4 hours to do instruction. Why we're here, I don't know.
You're looking very well, may I say.
I feel fine.
Admiral Sprague, after we passed and proved the effectiveness of the converted collier as an aircraft carrier, where does the Saratoga come in?
Well, the Saratoga in Lexington I mean, the World War, the ones you're talking about, not the others, they were designed as battle cruisers.
I believe we have some footage now.
And they were as a result of the 1922 arms conference, they were scratched off the list of cruisers and were converted to carriers, and they were very successful as carriers.
You had
they had their shortcomings, but
yes.
they were very good. They were big, you know, and
They had to take all the superstructure off the top of the cruiser. You say, move it to one side and give you a flight deck?
No, the upper part of the ship was completely redesigned, but
yes.
the hull was used as is.
Right.
So that it wasn't a great deal. It wasn't difficult to convert them. I mean, from a shipbuilding point.
Well, when you got to this original Saratoga, did you have a much longer flight deck than you had with the original Tiger?
Oh, yeah. It was about 888 feet. I've forgotten exactly.
I would presume, too, that with the first attempt at this, there wouldn't be the means for stowing the planes below deck or anything.
Yes, that's adequate hangars.
That's with the Saratoga?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the next carrier after that was designed from the ground up as a carrier, which was the Ranger, the first Ranger.
See?
And she was much smaller. She was built with what was left over of the tonnage available.
And this was all done during the period between World War I and, after World War II.
Well, and the Depression.
Yes.
Because after the Depression, in order to make work, one of the things they did was start building ships again, which were badly needed, and it's lucky they did, because they needed those ships badly when the thing started, you know.
And now, Major Hallett, we've come over to Mr. Germerod over there, and I believe that he's concerned with the rebuilding of one of these historical planes. Which plane was it?
Don can tell you about flying that replica of the Navy's A-1, the first naval airplane.
Why was it decided to build an antique, rebuild an airplane like that?
Well, I think you can tell you that.
All right, Don?
Well, it was really something to go back in history 50 years and really reconstruct, and this is a replica of the Curtiss A-1 that you've heard about very much previously. We have made some minor changes to it. I felt that since we couldn't do a stress analysis on a bamboo knot, that I'd like to have something to hold my tail on a little bit better, and so we used some aluminum tubing.
There was no change in the dimensions, but it would be in the materials used. Would that be it?
That's correct. And just in the longerons, which held the tail plane on, was a major change. However, we did have a Curtiss OX5 engine on it. That OX5 5-ox power was good for 90 horsepower, and we really needed it because the airplane was a little bit heavier than the original. This float, the position of the float originally was not in the proper location. However, we decided to go ahead and fly it by flying at a very aft center of gravity, which meant that we were a little bit shy on stability. So this particular airplane was like flying an 8-ball, quite a bit different.
I kind of recognize your mechanic in some of those pictures. Is that Mr. Hallett? No, it wasn't? Not sure.
This was Ray Pike, and he did a tremendous job on this airplane. If it wasn't for his loving care, why, it would have never flown, believe me. And I really appreciated having him support this operation. It was truly a team effort all the way.
What inspired the rebuilding of this plane? Why was it done?
It commemorates the 50th anniversary of naval aviation, this being the first aircraft that the Navy had in its inventory. And it was the fond hope of the Institute of Aerospace Sciences and the Navy to commemorate the 50th anniversary with an actual flight. So this is it.
It was built here in San Diego.
That is correct, and this particular airplane is now in the Aerospace Museum. As we taxi out, notice how low the float is in the water. This is due to our weight.
Where did this test take place? What geographically, where are we?
You might say right over where the old Spanish bike used to be. However, we did fly it around the bay on several of our test operations.
Was this flying in a Spanish bike? Was this an attempt at sticking with tradition, or did you just happen to?
It was an ideal spot for it because, again, because of wind, we couldn't fly it in very high wind. In fact, on Sunday during the air show,
I was actually varying from stall speed to max speed due to the gusting wind that we had. It really was a questionable day to fly it, but we wanted to go ahead with the program.
Now, you had flown all kinds of equipment before this. Did you kind of have to learn to fly all over again with these new kinds of controls? New to you.
Well, not exactly. You were talking about the Tin Goose, the old Ford Tri-Motor. I flew one of those just a few months ago, the American Airlines replica, one that the Mexican family had been living in down in Mexico, and American Airlines picked it up and restored it. And, of course, flying the 102, the F-102, the 106, and all the Navy's inventory of fighters. It's quite a change going back to this.
Your controls, did you have a foot bar for the rudder? Or what kind of, do you recall the rudder controls for this A1 replica?
Yes, we had conventional pedals for the rudder and the wheel control for the lateral control and also for pitch. However, it was rather unstable. If you notice the takeoff, it jumps off like a jackrabbit because of the tremendous suction from the flat bottom. We didn't have a step-type float.
I mean, it would hold to the water until it was really ready to be airborne, and then when it was ready to be airborne, it would pop out of the water?
That's correct. And the engine was very interesting. We had, the way we had it instrumented, if the engine overheated, had a little standpipe from the radiator down to my foot, so that was our instrumentation. We'd get a hot foot.
How many times or how many hours were actually put on the replica of the A1 before it went back to the museum? Do you have any idea?
Oh, we flew approximately 2.5 hours, I guess.
Was it shown in any other parts of the country other than just here?
No, it flew here, and that was it.
We proved we could do it, and now it goes under glass.
That's correct.
I understand that there's an interesting story about at the Aerospace Museum that one of the original Wright brothers engines has shown up, and you have it there?
This is right. Major Howard can tell you about that.
Oh, yes. That's an engine, a four-cylinder Wright engine, designed about 1907, and this particular engine was made in 1911. It's interesting because, unlike modern engines, it had no throttle, and the speed was controlled by a magneto that had an immense range of advance and retard.
Just by controlling the spark?
Yes. And if they wanted to cut the power still more, they had means of raising all the exhaust valves so the two big slow-turning propellers would windmill the engine over, keep it moving, and if the pilot wanted it again, why, he kind of pulled the whistle cord up here, and that let the valves heat, and he was trying to take off and get going again.
Well, I mean, all the time keeping his fingers and toes crossed, that it was going.
And this thing had...
Yes, go right ahead. Don't bother about it.
This thing had a fuel injection, believe it or not, of a sort, instead of a carburetor.
How did this engine come into your being, into your
That's
possession?
an interesting story all by itself. Too long to tell you now. I got it from an old fellow up on top of Palomar Mountain.
And we're going to take up that story as we are able to investigate it more. We've talked about aviation as it started here in San Diego at North Island, starting at the year 1911. And we've been very pleased to have all these pioneers with us this evening, an assemblage that we're just very, very lucky to have. And we want to thank you for being with us. Before we wind up proceedings, I think we should talk about our modern flight equipment, and we have two gentlemen to tell us about this, Captain Lehman and Captain Collins. You are, sir?
Captain Collins, right?
Happy to have you aboard, sir.
Happy to be aboard.
And Captain Lehman. I understand that we just got you away from a banquet.
It was sort of a party for the people leaving and the people arriving at North Island.
Well, I'm sorry that you missed all the excitement we've had here this evening. We have some footage of modern naval aircraft, I understand, we're going to look at, and we'll ask you to tell us about these as we see them. And as soon as we get airborne, why, here we go. Do you recognize this silhouette? What have we got here?
Bob, take over. That is a jet, as you can see.
Yes, and we just went through the sound barrier there. I heard it go.
Like the F-82.
No,
Bob, tell us, say that this is after my time. You only say the name.
Well, we have some more aircraft pioneers with us this evening here. This is, maybe we don't even have these unclassified. You recognize the complicated instruments that are inside, and here we are. Is that coming up on a catapult?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
That is one of the attack aircraft that are in the modern fleet today.
And here is again this huge airplane landing on the short deck and stopping, and it looked like it was stopping at about 40 to 60 feet.
Yes, in fact, Frank, Elmer Sprague mentioned about the first Ranger that they had, and I was privileged to be in the fighting squadron aboard that first Ranger. And after qualifying for the old election, they looked that Ranger down in the ocean and said, who turned that picket fence loose in the middle of the ocean?
What is the latest thing that we have to look forward in naval aviation? Taking off straight up and landing straight down? Is that coming up?
I think that is coming, but for the time being, I think our conventional attack and fighter aircraft will be with us for quite some time as we know aviation today, as we've known it in the past and gradually gotten up to the speeds that we're making now and carrying the weapon loads that we're now carrying.
Captain Collins, Captain Leaning, and all you gentlemen, we thank you very much for joining us in our living room this evening and bringing us the romance of aviation as it relates to San Diego, and we found that we've got more to take up in the future. We'll see you again.
Hollywood guests on Sundown flown by a PSA airline. Hotel accommodations courtesy of the Ocean House.